watched my fiancé sip espresso across from the woman who was funding our wedding. They thought I wouldn't understand what their hands under the table were saying. I was the one who built the table. I don't mean built the table in the twee, Pinterest sense, though I have sanded my share of wood. I mean I built the room those tables sat in, figuratively. Hearth is what we called my greenhouse lab at Teleskivi Creative City in Tallinn. Glass walls, a reclaimed wood conference table from a carpenter named Olavi in Kalamaja, and two mismatched brass lamps that made every late-night prototype look gentler than it was. That was where I taught myself how to debug a condensation sensor at 0217, how to explain evapotranspiration to a skeptical agronomist at 1305, and how to say no to money that wanted to own me. I am Nika Voronin, 31, founder and CEO of Aeronest OU, a startup that makes climate-control brains for urban greenhouses and rooftop farms. I live on Sutanav, in an old brick building with a dented turquoise door and a rooftop where I keep 3 hives. The beekeeper in me is the part people remember. The white suit, the hum, the way I rest my palm along a frame like it's a violin. My daily life is precision. I wake at 0610, drink black coffee in a chipped mug with a hexagonal crack, cycle past the water at Noblesna, and answer support tickets before 08 so that when my team comes online, I'm theirs. My passion project What Grounds Me is a small plot at the community garden on Copley where I grow thyme and tomatoes because I like the way their smells argue with each other. My former fiancé, was named Marcus Lanamets, 34. He called himself a performance consultant, which meant personal training dressed in a higher hourly rate and more black turtlenecks. He was kind in the way that handsome men are trained to be kind, attentive, apparently, like a concession. He showed up to my first hardware demo with vegan pastries from a place on Pernu MNT I couldn't afford. He massaged my wrists after long soldering sessions. He listened when I talked about embeddings in our moisture prediction model and actually asked follow-up questions. I let that glow hide his red flags. How he described other people's projects as cute. How he performed generosity. How he kept forgetting to include receipts when he expense-trenched my errands into our shared budgeting app and then insisted he had sent them already. I thought he came from scarcity. I told myself I understood. We got engaged on 2024 to 10:05 at Pirita, statues squeaking in the wind. The ring was a modest sapphire, invoices assumed later to be lost when I asked. It's us, he said, meaning stone and sea and permanence. I believed him. At the time, Aeronest had 3 pilots, 2 in Tartu, 1 in Riga, 73,200 in the bank, and a runway of 9 months at our burn rate. Our product was a control unit the size of a paperback and a dashboard that looked prettier than it had any right to. I had a term sheet for 400,000 on my desk from a woman named Helena Unap, 46, a former logistics CEO who'd recast herself as a climate tech investor. She wasn't my first choice. Her reputation was stainless steel, sharp, polished, cold. But she moved fast and knew how to open doors at supermarkets that might want their own greenhouses. Seed money is speed money, Marcus would say, squeezing my shoulder. Take it while it's hot. We met Helena at Sphere, the cafe on Mare Puiste with the mirror I hate because it never tells the truth. She wore a navy suit, no jewelry, and had that Baltic posture that reads like insult to slouchers. Her first questions were about margins, not mission. Her second were about control, board composition, liquidation preferences, veto rights. I answered calmly because I had done my homework and because my father taught me to talk to strangers like they were cousins. We danced our numbers and our whys. At the end, she slid a paper across the table, a revised term sheet with a founder guarantee clause that tried to bind my personal assets to performance triggers, and smiled as if we were both notaries to the same dream. That clause is unacceptable, I said, smiling back. Clause 7. 3 of our existing shareholder agreement forbids transfers or encumbrances without unanimous consent. I didn't have to add that Ernest was me. The lab was my salary, my home, my bees. She nodded, took the clause out, and we agreed to talk again. From that day, Marcus started saying the quiet part louder. "You need to stop splitting your focus," he said on 2024-11-01, standing at my stove, burning oat milk like it owed him money. "Move to operations or product. Let someone else be the face. That investor obviously prefers a certain kind of CEO." "What kind?" I asked, though I knew. He meant older, richer, colder, maybe male, maybe just someone who made him feel big. The kind who doesn't have to manage 1 million things like bees and blogs and all your community stuff, he said. "You're the brains. Get someone with presence." "Presence," I repeated. "Like posture?" "Like hunger," he said, and kissed my temple like he'd offered a benediction. Money, respect, family, ambition. The 4 legs of every table that breaks. We had moved in together in August, splitting rent, $730 from me, $590 from him. He promised parity when 2 new clients signed. His clients were men with shiny watches who called him on speaker and said, "Bro, how shredded can I get by Christmas?" And women who sent him before and afters that he hid. Our rules were naive and earnest. We shared groceries, kept separate professional bank accounts, and maintained an Excel workbook called Blueprint, XLX, with tabs like wedding, bills, and future. If your relationship lives in a workbook, you must accept that one day you will scroll to a tab called Damage. We set the wedding for 2025-06-21 and Solstice of Promises at a greenhouse in Noma with string lights and long tables that I planned to cover in tiny jars of honey. Helena mentioned she loved supporting founders' weddings. "It's brand building," she said. Laugh, laugh, so she offered her garden in VMC for the photos and introduced me to her event planner. I didn't want the money smell anywhere near my vows. I said we'd pay. The first crack came quietly on 2024-12-18. I was balancing the books when I saw 3 charges on our joint debit card to Mary Noire, a rooftop bar in a new hotel facing the sea, all between 1900 and 23 Awao. 86, 40, 13, 80, 46, 20. We had agreed, no joint card charges for personal meetings. I asked Marcus. He said he'd met a corporate client who wanted to get his team into shape post-New Year. "I bought their first round," he said. "It's business development." "Send me the receipts," I said, and he smiled like the word receipts was a pet name. The week of Christmas, I brought him to Ida Virumar to meet my mother and my grandmother, who folds dumplings like origami. He performed well. He told stories. He cut firewood with my uncle and returned with a sprig in his hair like a miniature man. My grandmother kissed his head. Underneath, I felt a saw tracing the line in my beam. On 2025-001-A06, we signed with Helena for $400,000 at a 3.2M pre-money valuation, 1x non-participating liquidation preference, 2 board seats, 1 hers, 1 mine, and a 3-person observer bench, 1 of her analysts, 1 of my advisors, and a rotating expert. I sent the signed PDFs to our lawyer, Cart. Helena shook my hand and hugged Marcus. "Now don't let her hide from the CEO things," she said to him, in a tone I did not like. "Wouldn't dream of it," he said. And that is how a dream ends. The fundraiser tour started. Calls, diligence, manufacturer visits in Paid, a trip to Helsinki to talk to a grocery chain about in-store herbs. On 2025-02-11 at 09:12, I got a text from Helena. "Can you meet at Sphere at 11? So, I said yes. I arrived, took the table by the mirror I hate, and saw them, Helena in a cream sweater, and Marcus, black turtleneck, head tilted as if performing intimacy. His hand under the table moved in a way I recognized. I recognized it because it was my hand in other times, other contexts, and because once you've held a frame full of bees with your bare hands, You understand every hum in a room. I stayed standing where they couldn't see me and felt my breath fold itself into the shape of a plan. I did not storm. The hook of shame that most people swallow is that they've failed to keep someone. That is not a hook I own. I stepped forward and placed my palm on the back of the chair opposite them. Am I interrupting a board meeting? I asked, cheerful the way ice is cheerful in whiskey. Helena's face reconfigured one muscle at a time. Marcus's eyes flicked from her to me to the mirror and then back. Nika, Helena said, I asked Marcus for founder context. In private, I said. At 11 now, using our joint card? Marcus cleared his throat. Client, we were discussing optics. Of what? I asked. Your hand, or the claws you tried to sneak back in. We didn't, Helena started, then stopped. Which is how I knew there was more than I knew. I took my phone out, tapped the camera, and placed it face up on the table. It recorded the way it always does. Quietly. Let's be clear, I said. Helena, you and I have a signed agreement. Marcus has no legal standing at Aeronest OU. If you wish to discuss founder context, you will do so with me or not at all. Marcus, if you wish to discuss my company with my investor, you will do so in my presence or not at all. And if either of you wish to discuss your personal optics, you may do so with someone who isn't currently being asked to sign over her life. Don't be dramatic, Marcus said. It's always dramatic when a woman refuses to detonate quietly. It's my greatest shortcoming, I said, picked up my phone and left. I cycled to the lab. I closed the door. I stood in the middle of the floor and listened to the bees in my head. Then I began. First, passwords. At 12:03, I changed the admin passwords for our banking accounts, LHV and Swedbank, Slack, Notion, AWS, GitHub, our manufacturer portal. I sent a Slack message to the team 12 people who had signed up for a life of humid air and tight deadlines, saying there had been a security incident unrelated to customer data, and I would explain more at 14 Nakar in an all-hands. I disabled Marcus's access to anything he didn't have access to, because of course he never had access. He had used my laptop enough to see the shapes of the tabs I kept open. Second, documentation. I created a folder named 2025 ZO2 11 Incident and dropped in the video from Sphere. I took screenshots of the joint card transactions for the last 8 weeks and circled the ones I did not recognize. Mary Noir, Hotel Telegraph SPA, Vimsi Sound World, 2 charges at Column Sibulat that happened on nights I was at a hardware workshop in Tartu. I printed them because paper has a way of making people tell the truth. Third, locks. I texted my landlord and arranged a locksmith for that evening at 18:30. I texted Marcus, do not be at the apartment at 18:30. Your things will be packed. You may collect them at 20 Gaji. Bring a friend for the boxes. You will not have a key. Fourth, money. I opened Blueprint XLSX, went to the Bills tab, and made a new section titled Settlement. I moved 1,808 data, what we had agreed as a buffer, from the joint account into my personal LHV account and labeled the transfer Household Reserve. I took the remainder, 1.72 of 14, and left it. I pulled our last 3 rent receipts from my email. I printed them along with MTA tax statements. I found the invoice for my ring from a jeweler in Kadriorg. It was indeed not paid. The lost invoice had never been sent. Fifth, counsel. I called Kart, our lawyer. Talk to me like I just walked into a wall and want to know if the wall is load-bearing, I said. She did. Estonian law is plain if you read it without the melodrama. We weren't married. Our accounts were joint in name only, and both signatories had the right to withdraw unless one contested. My lease was in my name. The equipment in the lab had serial numbers and logs with my signatures. The company was mine on paper and in law unless I chose to give it away. The thing to worry about was soft, bad faith, rumor, the way stories distort in rooms where power sits. I will send a letter to Helena's counsel reminding her of her obligations and the bounds of her board rights, Cart said, and a personal note that any continued contact with Mr. Lanametz about company matters will be considered a breach of fiduciary duty. Add the part about hands, I said, and she laughed the way lawyers laugh when you give them a gift they can't use. At 14 hours, I stood in front of my team with a whiteboard marker that left a blue dot on my hand like a mole. We had a boundary violation, I said. There is no breach of customer data, no breach of contracts. The violation is personal and it intersects with professional. I am handling it. I will protect you from the fallout and I will protect our work. Today and tomorrow will be chaotic. Breathe. Ask questions. Write everything down. And if something feels wrong, say it. We spoke for 45 minutes. I answered what I could. I did not say cheating because I do not like the way that word reduces everything to sheets. I said conflict of interest, which is the grown-up way of saying you have found a shard in your fruit. At 18:30 the locksmith came. He was square, kind, and did not ask. I packed Marcus's things into 5 boxes. Clothes, shoes, kitchen gadgets he loved too much to leave, toiletries, books that were mine once, he could keep them. I did not need his annotations. And a last box of the particular, a scarf of mine he claimed by proximity, the kind of pen he liked to borrow and ruin, a print of a painting we bought at a flea market that showed 2 birds with their beaks tied together. He arrived at 20:07, on time in the way that men are when they believe they are owed. He had a friend with him, a man who said, "Weird night," in a tone that wanted me to say, "It's fine." It was not fine, and I did not say it. "We should talk," Marcus said. "We will not talk here," I said. "Here is a list of your things. Sign. Here is a receipt for your share of rent that covers us through February. Here is a printed account statement. Here is a copy of our budget for the last 6 months with notes on which transactions I consider personal. If you disagree, send me a list by Friday." "You're making a scene," he said. The locksmith had left. The friend shifted. My building's dented door made its dented sound whenever anyone entered the stairwell. "Scenes are useful," I said. "They separate acts." He looked at me like the person he loved could not be so administrative. I watched grief flutter and then land. For a second I thought he might be gentle. Then he said, "You need someone who keeps you from becoming a machine. Helena understands that." "And you?" I asked. He smiled. "I am the person who will make sure your genius doesn't get in your own way." There are sentences that wear disguises. That one went as love and came as control. I opened the door wider. He and his friend carried his boxes down 2 flights. On the second trip, I caught the friend's eye. He whispered, "Sorry." I nodded because some apologies are for the air. That night, Helena emailed, "There appears to have been a misunderstanding at Sphere. It would be regrettable if personal matters interfered with the company's momentum. Marcus has insights into your leadership that could be useful." I replied with a PDF. Summary of 2025-02-11 Incident and Boundary Remediation Steps, with headers like access control measures, fiscal safeguards, board communication protocol, and personal boundaries. It had photos of the receipts, a transcript of our 11,000 conversation at Sphere, polished but true, and a restatement of Clause 4. 2 in the shareholder agreement. The investor shall not interfere with day-to-day management. I copied Cart. I ended with, "I will not tolerate attempts to use my personal life as leverage. If this persists, I will call an extraordinary board meeting to formalize restrictions. We have work to do." The next day, 2025-02-12, my phone began to hum. The messages started soft. "We need to process. I miss you. Do you remember the morning at Noblessner?" And then move to the fevered, "You are sabotaging us. Helena is only trying to help. Don't be stupid, Nika. Take the money and let someone else talk in the rooms you hate. Open the door." He came to the lab at 10:16. My team locked the front. He came to the apartment at 22:40. The new lock held. He left a note under the door that said, "You are wasting your life being right." On 2025-02-13, I went to the police station on Col des Puistes and made a report. The officer listened, took my timeline, my screenshots, the note. He explained the process for a restraining order in practical language. An application to Harju County Court, evidence, the thing we call distance, written into meters. He didn't promise protection. He promised procedure. Sometimes procedure is the only safe room. At work, we hardened. We added two-factor to everything. We installed a new lock to the lab. We moved our weekly stand-up to mornings with a rotating schedule so that if someone followed me, they weren't following everyone. We documented every visit, every message, every too casual question from people who used to be his. We wrote down who asked what and when. We put our documentation in an encrypted drive labeled with what it was. Defense. Helena pinged. "Let's get past this," she wrote. "Your passion is unquestioned, but your emotionality is challenging." There it was, the mirror. I scheduled a board meeting for 2025-02-20, 09:30 at our lab. I sent an agenda. 1. Investor conduct. 2. Board boundaries. 3. Reporting cadence. 4. Hiring plan. I rang my advisor in Tartu, a woman named Mare who grows pears like they're secrets. She said, "People who prefer to control the story will call you emotional when you tell it without their edits. Bring documents. Bring a calm. Bring a chair that doesn't squeak." At 09:17 on the 20th, Helena walked in with her analyst, Rasmus, who looked as if he knew what was happening and wished he did not. My team sat on the far side of the glass, working, their presence a soft spine. "Before we begin," I said, "I want to state the facts I consider relevant to our governance." I laid them down: date, time, place, the sphere meeting, the emails, the messages, the visits. I passed copies of thread summaries with identifying details redacted because this was still my life. I passed a restatement of the law about interference with management. I passed a draft of a board member conduct policy that Cart and I wrote at 02:40 the night before, with items like no discussing company matters with non-authorized persons, no using personal relationships to influence company decisions, no asking for CEO performance changes outside regular review frameworks, no meeting with close partners of the CEO without disclosure and consent. I passed a lock of persona. I kept my face clear. Helena's mouth did the smallest half-smile of respect that often arrives at the same time as refusal. "You are thorough," she said. "I am consistent," I said. "We can add this policy to our governance by a board vote, 2 of 3 needed. Or we can discuss why we chose each clause and what we are trying to defend." She read. Rasmus read faster. "These are reasonable," he said. "We should have had them already." Helena shot him a flake of a look that said, "Not now," but he was right. "I will vote for this policy," she said at last. "But I will also be frank. My confidence has wavered, not in your product. In you as the public face. If you want to keep this moving, consider hiring an operator." "I will continue as CEO," I said. "We will hire an operator when we can afford it, and they will report to me. If you require the opposite, we can talk about buying your stake back. We'll need evaluation." "Don't threaten," she said. "I'm offering paths," I said. We voted. The policy passed. After, Helena asked to speak to me alone. "Marcus can be charming," she said. "It's a disease men in his line catch. Don't let it infect your decisions." "You touched his hand under the table," I said. "Don't let that infect yours." She did not reply, which is how apology sometimes shapes itself in people who refuse to name it. She left, and Rasmus lingered just long enough to say, quietly, "If you need someone to present to the dull men in suits while you keep building the thing, I can help you with slides." In the days that followed, Marcus escalated the way people do when they see their leverage dull. He messaged my mother, who is private and small and stubborn, and told her he was worried about my mental health. He called my landlord. He waited outside the lab and asked my interns to pass along love. He sent me a screenshot of a draft email to a journalist friend in a business magazine, in which he framed himself as the supportive partner whose concerns about governance were ignored by an emotional founder. He wrote, "Publish?" And then, when I did not answer, "Last chance." I took everything to the police. The officer looked at the messages, then at me. "He is trying to force a reaction," he said. "Write once, then stop." I wrote, "Marcus, do not contact me again, except through counsel. Do not approach my home, my workplace, or my family. Future communications will be logged and forwarded to the police and my lawyer. This is your notice." I sent it, and then turned off notifications for everything but 3 numbers. My mother's, my CTO's, my lawyer's. The quiet that arrived was not empty. It was the sound of a hive after smoke, shocked, then organized. In March, we installed 2 Aeronest units in a rooftop greenhouse at a supermarket on Peterborough Tay. The pilot went well. The basil didn't wilt when the March sun pretended it was May. The store manager sent us a note he didn't have to write. The leaves look like confidence. On 2025-03-11, we signed a purchase order for 30 units with a delivery schedule and a very precise discount. Numbers have arms, the way they reach for you. I started sleeping again, which is to say I stopped dreaming of doors. I went back to the community garden and turned the soil until it let go of winter. On a Saturday, a woman with a bandana and a laugh that sounded like a drawer opening asked if she could take a picture of my hive frames. Her name was Lisa Pern, 29, a doctoral student at the Estonian University of Life Sciences in Tartu, who studies how urban pollination patterns change when people plant flowers that make Instagram happy. We started walking together slow loops through Kalamaja, where the houses lean like listeners. She bought me a coffee and did not tell me to be less. When I said I had to cut our second cup short because I needed to run numbers before a board packet, she asked if she could sit beside me and read proofs. When I left the room, she didn't touch my laptop. We did not call it anything because I had no room for calling. What we did was share air. I renovated my Saturdays to include her. On 2025-04-03, Helena called me at 08:43 and said, "We need to talk about the press." She sounded tired, which was new. "A journalist asked me if it's true I interfered in your management." "Did Marcus send his email?" I asked. "I don't know," she said, which meant yes. "We can respond," I said, "with truth and good work." At 11:00, I posted a small thread on Aeronest's LinkedIn. As we grow, we're learning how to formalize what used to be informal. This week, our board adopted a new conduct policy that articulates how we protect our team's autonomy and our customer commitments. Governance is a greenhouse. It keeps the frost off the delicate parts so they have a chance to become hardy. I attached nothing. I tagged no one. I sent a private note to the journalist, forwarding our policy and inviting them to the greenhouse on Peterborough Tea to taste a leaf. They came, tasted, and wrote a piece about tech that tastes like something. There was a quote buried in paragraph 12 about boundaries. It was enough. On 2025-04-19 at 21:12, my buzzer went. I checked my camera. Marcus stood there, hood up, hands jammed into the pockets of a jacket I bought him in a sale, I remember, because there's a tag still stuck somewhere in a drawer. He looked like a boy burning in his own smoke. "Please," he said into the intercom, "I have to say things. Helena is going to pull funding. You're going to lose everything. Let me in." I called the police. They took 20 minutes. He did not leave. He sat on the step and texted me his thesis on regret. He told me what he and Helena did and when and whether she called my name with hers. He wrote his confession like a door he could walk back through. I turned the volume down and wrote the time he arrived, 21:12, the things he said, abridged, the time he left, 21:35, and the badge number of the officer who took the statement. I did not let him in. I did not let him drag me back to the table he thought he owned. The court granted a temporary protection order 5 days later, with provisions that he stay 200 meters from my home and workplace and not contact me directly. Paper again, not a wall, but paper shapely enough that it changes the room. Helena did not pull funding. She did what people do when they glimpse their own slippage. She stepped back, face saved, story preserved. At the next board meeting, she asked about margin improvements in our second batch and whether our fisherman's market pilot had yielded any data. I answered with numbers. Bomb down 12. 7 due to consolidated suppliers, a redesign of the enclosure that saved IRO. 63 per unit, a firmware update that cut error reports by 38 in the first week. I had attached graphs and then took them out because I wanted to talk like a person in a room, not a deck. In May, we installed a greenhouse at a vocational school in Lasnamäe and trained a group of 17-year-olds on data they could touch. They responded the way teenagers do when you give them a machine and ask them what it tells them about themselves. One of them, a boy with a scar under his left eye, asked me if the basil would taste different if the room loved it more. I said, yes, but the love is in the airflow. Lisa started bringing me jars of soil to smell because she said I needed to learn how to tell rain from rot. I introduced her to my hives. She became very still when a bee landed on her wrist. Then she smiled with her mouth closed, like a secret that does not need an audience. The last time I saw Marcus was the kernel of a comedy if you could stand outside it. He was at Prisma on Sola by the mushrooms, beanie on, shopping basket half full of things someone had told him were good for longevity. He saw me, froze, then looked around as if to check if anyone else wanted to be a witness. I felt my pulse do its job. He didn't approach. He put his head down and walked away with his basket swaying. People ask how I knew I was done. It wasn't at Sphere, though it could have been. It wasn't the notes, the visits, the intercom that hummed his name like a hymn. It was my bees. I opened a hive in June and watched them fan air over the combs because that's what you do when it's too warm. You make wind. Their bodies were method and mercy. I realized I had rebuilt my life the way they keep a house, together with rules that serve the work and the tenderness to bend when weather changes. I realized he had never loved me in the way that keeps a room. On 20/25/06/21, the day we were supposed to get married, I went to the greenhouse in Nurm and stood under the strings of lights we'd reserved. The event planner asked, "Are you here for setup?" And then recognized me and realized what she'd said. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't be," I said. I walked the length of a table and put my hand on the wood the way you touch someone's shoulder when you mean thank you. I took a tiny jar of honey out of my bag and left it on the center plank, like a gift for the version of me who almost sat there and did not. The new ally isn't just Lisa, though she is part of the weave. It is Rasmus sending a note before every board meeting that says, "Anything you want me to walk for you?" It is my CTO, Elmo, taking over the next investor update so I can spend a Friday afternoon with a broken humidity sensor. It is the cashier at Prisma who looked at me once, then at Marcus's back, and put my receipt in my hand like a baton. It is my mother who no longer answers unknown numbers. The twist ending is that there is no twist. The knife was in the first sentence, and I took it out without bleeding to death. But if you insist, if you want the mirror to face something, remember the espresso. Remember the hand under the table. Yesterday, Helena sent an email with one line only. "Congratulations on the Peterbury tea expansion. Those basil leaves are famous now." No apology, no confession. The distance between us is governance and the work we did anyway. I wrote back, "We'll send you a sprig when we harvest." Marcus once told me he planned to forget the ugly parts of his life by writing over them with nicer scenes. "Give me a week," he said once when we were still kind. "I'm good at forgetting the worst." He said he'd forget me in a week, but I'm the one who forgot him.